I'm John Efeolu from Databricks on the product management team. I'm here joined by Parker and Gareth from Riot Games, and we're going to talk about how Riot Games is powering their player-first gaming experiences with Databricks and DBT Cloud. And I'm sure you're more excited about the fireside chat portion of this, so I'm going to keep the intro a bit quickly, but just wanted to give you a few things and tell you about how we're kind of building out the experiences and our side, the connectivity into the DBT Cloud, and how Databricks SQL is powering some of these experiences. As you know, right, we're Databricks, the creator of Delta Lake, MLflow, Spark, Unity Catalog, DBRX, with a lot of open source focus. And the way we think about data and AI is, as we kind of look at our own customers, as we kind of look at the top users of our platforms, we kind of see that the ones that can utilize data and AI the most kind of make the most headways in the space, right? And how do they do that, right? They kind of start from the data being in an open data lake, whether that's Azure, whether that's AWS, that's whether Google Cloud, kind of have a layer for cataloging that data. We're using Unity Catalog, which is, how you kind of get, data assets in Databricks across any of these data lakes, secure them, permission them, govern them, and then make them available to others. On top of that, right, they basically use the four kind of pillars at the top to kind of get to their use cases, whether that's data warehousing with Databricks SQL, whether that's orchestration and making ETL jobs with the workflows, whether that's doing incremental real-time analytics or just ETL with Delta Live tables, and data science and AI with the Mosaic AI part. And all of this is kind of vertically integrated as part of the Databricks ecosystem, right? So from all the way, starting with your, Parquet tables, data assets in the data lake, up to the catalog, and then kind of making it available to whatever user personas you have, whether, those folks are data engineers, analysts, data scientists, or basically ML engineers. And as we kind of think about, how we work with DBT, right? We basically provide a unified platform approach where you kind of get the benefit of all of these things that I told you about within the same kind of interface, within the same kind of platform. But DBT does the same for kind of providing a unified framework for handling the data from all the way to, from the raw data piece to kind of making sure that you have a way to develop your models, test and document them, deploy them, and then kind of iterate on it right from within the same interface without kind of having to go to different things. And then the whole point of this is that, whether you're then serving that to BI tools, ML models, or using that for operation analytics, it's kind of all happening in that unified way. And we kind of love that, us being the platform and DBT Labs being the framework on top of it, kind of provides you with this without you having to kind of change your patterns. And this is something we're actually seeing a lot from our customers, right? From Riot to Atlassian to Actify. A lot of these customers are actually successful already on the combination of DBT and Databricks, kind of powering a lot of their data platform and data assets. And this is not just about the top enterprise accounts or a few of them, but thanks to the community, right? We're seeing increasing momentum as we kind of see year-over-year growth for the downloads, now past 1 million recently, right? We're seeing 15 million queries, around 15 million queries daily, which is basically more than doubled since last year, right? We're also seeing just the compute usage side, right? Basically the raw compute side also 2xing, 3xing year over year. And that speed is actually picking up, which is not something that you see at this scale. So that's something we're very excited about. And part of the reason we think that these things are happening is we're kind of trying to make sure that we're taking two approaches where whatever we release in Databricks, we try to embed into the adapter, such as streaming tables, materialized views. Streaming tables in this case, for example, makes it very easy for you to, in an incremental fashion, get all of your data sets, all of your data assets from cloud storage or these messaging platforms directly, natively integrated into DBT. And materialized views, for example, lets you do a lot of these transformations without you having to craft incremental strategies yourself, but automatically getting it done behind the scenes. So the idea here is, right, as we add these capabilities into native Databricks, we make them available in the DBT adapter, so you don't have to kind of think about the second nature of that. But at the same time, right, We are making sure that we're keeping up with the innovations on the DBT side. For example, as you heard earlier in the keynotes, Iceberg support is coming. A lot of these other things are coming, and we want to make sure that they make their way into our adapters to make sure that you can kind of use them without having to wait for it. One of the things I want to point out is, a lot of these things behind the scenes in terms of execution, getting the great price performance, is things that we want to make sure that you get without having to think about it or without having to tune your database, right? So a lot of things that we're building is around making sure that you kind of get the best of what you can get in terms of data warehousing, which is now recognized by analyst firms like Gartner or Forrester as like being top in the industry, without having to think about or without having to configure. And the way we do that is by 3 ways, right? One of them is we're building in intelligent experiences to all of our products, different services, whether you're like authoring SQL, whether you're authoring pipelines, whether you're dealing with talk to my data interfaces, or whether you're building dashboards. This is all kind of integrated up the stack, as I mentioned, right? So from Unity Catalog to all of these data assets, you kind of get the intelligence built in. So without, you define once, and then that becomes available. Similarly, right, as you're kind of looking at optimizing your workloads and kind of making sure that we give you the best price performance, those things are also built in, so you don't have to think about tuning them. And talking about the intelligent experiences, right, this is all powered by what we're calling Databricks IQ, which is a mix of natural language interfaces, intelligent search and discovery experiences, AI-powered governance built into Unity Catalog, and then a lot of things about simplifying administration. So we do a lot of that tuning of the knobs for you without you having to figure that out. And what that looks like across different surfaces is, for example, if you're in the SQL editor, right, there's an assistant built in that's basically helping you correct your errors before you realize you made an error. If you're kind of writing a query, it suggests the right relevant tables, joins, whatever you name it. On the dashboards, right, you can basically say, hey, I want a dashboard that visualizes KPI year over year, and that will actually build you the dashboard for it without you having to think about it. And similarly, right, if you just want to have an interface where you can ask questions about your data sets and make that available, that's where AI BI Genie comes in. And all of these things are kind of building on top of the same kind of interface to make sure that, to ensure that you get the best of, the intelligence without, again, having to build it yourself. And similarly, right, in a similar way, we want to make sure that as you're kind of using the platform, we make things faster for you, we make things like more performant. And a few ways we do that are, for example, is intelligent workload management, which is how we kind of automatically understand like the scale, the concurrency of your like clusters and queries to make sure that you kind of get the best of that without having to feel. So we do the auto scaling, we do the auto management of these things. Things like automatic data layouts or indexless indexing makes it very easy for you to get the most of your data assets, again, without having those knobs. So in these examples, right, you're kind of getting 2 to 3x benefit on these tables without having to think about it, because our maintenance algorithms are kind of behind the scenes taking care of a lot of these things without you having to create an index, without you having to maintain an index, and without you having to change a lot of these things as you're doing them. And how does these all come together? They kind of come in together for like continuous like development, right? So this is, you're kind of seeing how long a set of queries took in 2022 when we first launched Databricks SQL, right? Without you having to do anything, the same amount of queries basically now take probably like around 30 to 40% less. And as of this year, you're basically at 60% faster. And these are all things that you're getting the benefit of without having to again, change anything on your workloads. It's just a part of it happening. So now, I would like to invite Parker and Garrett, which were running the data platform side on the Riot Games. And as you know, Riot Games is the creator of League of Legends, Valorant, and TFT. So welcome to the stage. Nice to have you guys here.
It's great to be here. Does everyone hear me okay? Nice.
Perfect. Could you tell us about a bit more of yourselves and your roles at Riot?
Yeah, I am. So Riot Data is a centralized data team that handles all the platform, a lot of the ETL and analytics that form core tables, and then also all of the embed teams that are into like operating machine learning models and everything. And so I'm tech lead for it, which means more or less responsible for making sure everything works and that we're going towards the right place for building great things for our players.
Yeah, and I'm Gareth Marsh. I'm Senior Principal Insights Analyst. I'm on the consumer side, so I work in the Central Product Insights team. We work collaboratively across the entire organization and the portfolio of products that we have. And I also work a lot very closely with some of the game teams, so like League Insights, Val Insights, as well as our esports partners and others.
Awesome. Could you tell us a bit more about the role of data as you're kind of thinking about crafting player experiences, because you're known for like creating a lot of player-first experiences. So how does that work for you?
Yeah. So that got much louder. So traditionally, Riot was able to create gold by just being tastemakers. But over the last 5 or 6 years, they've realized that they can make even better decisions with using data and power a lot of user experiences. So with data, we definitely do a lot of decision science and interaction with insights. But there's a lot of interesting things around machine learning. So, I mean, obvious things of recommendation engines to help users get the skins that they want. Even going as far as smart bots, so AI-driven bots that will play against you in the games, right? So, 2xKO, I don't know if anybody was on the beta for that, but those bots are, well, they're badass. You should. They're taking on top-tier champions or top-tier players and beating them. So, yeah, it's basically data is ingrained into pretty much almost every layer of Riot now.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that the mission for Riot Games is to be the most player-centric company in the world, and so the player feedback has been kind of core to Riot's DNA ever since League of Legends launched. And so within the insights teams, we also have a lot of researchers who do a lot of player surveys. We combine that qualitative with our quant data to make sure that product managers are pointing feature development in the right area, and everything that we do is to really try and maximize player value.
That's showing in your games for sure. So what does this look like in terms of specific use cases that you're kind of thinking about, like on DBT, on Databricks? Like how these kind of like goals like translate into those use cases?
Yeah, so a lot of the insights groups are really focused on things that are specific to game health. So you can think about online competitive multiplayer games where matchmaking systems, player reporting, these are all mechanisms that exist to make sure that we're giving the best experience to players, that we're not matchmaking folks with the pros or the AI that's beating pros that Parker alluded to. But we want to make sure that toxicity is kept in check and that we're pushing updates to the games that are going to be resonant with our player base. And so some of these examples would be looking at audience segmentation across the different games as well as the portfolio. These will be things that really focus on going deep with some of these data science projects to really get into a granular level on like social play versus solo play, looking at spend behavior, looking at engagement rates, looking at platform choices. These are all factors, and these manifest in different projects. And so DBT has actually been really core for us. We're critical in getting a lot of our insights analysts to be more closely linked to the data tables. And so what we've done is effectively lowered the bar with DBT Cloud so that we have more collaborators that aren't just sharing notebooks. We love the Databricks notebook sharing feature, but this was another way that we could get them more collaboratively working with data engineers. If you read the blog that DBT published years ago, where you talk about data silos and different job roles not necessarily always communicating effectively, we were looking at certain teams that were very much working in isolation. And so we had people that were feeling certain pain points where they might be waiting for JIRA tickets to be published when, as a result, they're building their own pipelines in ways that we wouldn't necessarily want them to. And so with DBT, we're all contributing to the core model. We've developed pathways for analysts to build models that can be integrated into what would be a published shared model across the company. And so this is something that we continue to develop. And I think later we'll talk specifically about how that workflow works.
Yeah, to follow up there, so we've been a Databricks customer for a very, very long time now. It's about 9 years, something like that?
I think so.
So we were very early on, but that also means there's not been a whole lot of platform migrations, and so we had just a large accumulation of all sorts of data sets that are unclear if they're being used, they're being constantly generated, and it's just like, there's just a lot of things that accumulate over time. And so one of my biggest challenges when I first started at Riot was working with Gareth, like, how do we unlock insights analysts, for example, but keep them on a golden path to like promoting their code that they write as it becomes more core and foundational into the data engineering models without just throwing it over the fence or just like inundating our data engineers with PR requests and code reviews. And so the system we put together is essentially that. It's like using DBT to help schedule without really knowing what astronomy or what airflow is for analysts, while giving that path to promotion. And then in the long run, I've not mandated it yet, but it's, you know, the way we're moving is that all DBT, all like ETL should be done in DBT, and otherwise we'd have to invest in two different tool sets, and DBT has a lot of the things I'd want to build that are, you know, like if we're developing in notebooks. So it just makes more sense to like, it's already here, it's very engineering savvy, has a lot of controls in there, so move everything over to DBT.
Yeah, and I'll just add one final thing to that last point. Like we saw a pattern where certain dashboards might have been created for like a moment in time analysis, things that would have been specific to a certain patch or a specific feature, but then these got traction and kind of lived beyond their life expectancy. And so what we really needed was a way to have more production quality controls in terms of how we test data, how we publish data, and how we manage the life cycle of these products. And so by moving things into DBT, we were able to get that software developer lifecycle wrapped around some of these dashboards and tools that we know are going to be kind of evergreen throughout, you know, future releases.
Awesome. So great. You mentioned DBT Cloud earlier, by the way. How is the transition working out for you guys? So we're kind of seeing Databricks and DBT Cloud kind of power some of these things you mentioned.
Yeah, I would say we're still pretty early in the DBT Cloud transition. We've been using it in production basically over the summer. But very quickly, there's been a lot of interest from different roles, whether they're analysts or data engineers, to get into DBT Cloud and start their own projects. So I think now we have something like 7 or 8 different projects that exist in a monorepo. And so we're also looking forward to, you know, starting to experiment with features like DBT Mesh and using more of the semantic layer to really integrate a lot of these products and build downstream central reporting for things that would be, you know, at the portfolio level or at the company level. Whereas, you know, right now it's a lot of the game teams and product teams that are really building pipelines that are specific to their use cases. And so the workflow right now is actually very common. It's very similar to what DBT would teach you with DBT Cloud, where typically, you know, users would start either in a Databricks notebook or they would start right away in the DBT editor. They would profile the data, they would build their models, they would test them in a dev environment, which, you know, we use a Databricks catalog that's specific just for DBT development. And so every user has their own, you know, space that's safe and in isolation. Once that code is then checked in, we go through a peer review process. We have automations that one of our platform teams has built for us that will perform all the automatic DAG generation so that things get published into Airflow. And from that, we have other tools that are, you know, the data teams have been building. Parker's teams have put together a peer review module that uses AI, like an LLM, to look for certain standards and make sure that things are commented, that we've documented.
It's super mean. It's called ParkerBot.
Yeah, it's as mean as the real guy. Can attest to that. But you know, the process itself, it's been a new thing because a lot of analysts, you know, they're used to just like, they're kind of, you know, cowboys of SQL, and they'll just throw a query together, toss it in a dashboard, and ship it, right? And so seeing them kind of gravitate, and you get a lot of people where there's this aha moment, and they're like, oh, wow, like this is much safer. Anytime there's a problem, you're telling me that these automated jobs are going to trigger DBT tests, and I can get alerts before my stakeholders. So that's been a big paradigm shift, and you know, a lot of people have really adopted that and been very excited with the results.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy. Again, take 9 years of working in notebooks, and the engineering systems all built around it, and how people want to work, like sprinkling Python code with Python SQL, with you know, running SQL statements just as like, you know, .SQL, and it was all over the place. The standards weren't there, and so getting people to move over DBT has been a concerted effort, right? So we did a semi-slow rollout where we didn't want it to be just completely cowboy, and so we've been working with one of the new games coming out to set the standards for how how DBT should look and like the macros that should be used, and it's going to pioneer a lot of the coding standards we'd want to put into effect. And so we started releasing that, and we've started adding on analysts and adding on new teams as it goes along. And the general hope, again, I'm not mandating that everyone convert to DBT, but my hope is that as they see the value and how much quicker it is to develop in DBT and like write quality code and make sure it's correct, that just becomes naturally time-saving to migrate these giant notebooks that people are executing over to DBT models.
Well, and Parker and I have a great working relationship. We have a lot of healthy debate because we're very passionate about these issues. And so one of the things that I encourage Parker to look at DBT as is more of a carrot versus, in the past, I think a lot of teams have had to, and I know if you're on any engineering team, when you have to do a migration of any sort, you always have to wield the stick. But instead, we're really kind of trying to entice people by seeing, look at all these benefits that you get by being part of the core, these shared published models where all this documentation exists and you have full lineage throughout, from a column level down through, various schemas that can be cross-product.
Yeah, and you mentioned lineage, you mentioned kind of governance, and kind of that goes both ways in terms of having something for core data governance, security, privacy, which is I'm assuming critical for gaming, and then kind of making sure you have the data quality, access, and discovery, and that probably has both sides in Databricks and DBT. How are you kind of seeing that governance story play out in all platforms for you?
The governance question is a big one. So. We've migrated over to Unity Catalog, and most all of our access controls are through Unity Catalog. And one of the big challenges there was just we're an AWS shop, and so there's lots of people reaching in notebooks out to AWS resources, and that caused everyone had to have a AWS role, and it was just kind of a mess. So with Unity Catalog, we've migrated towards federated through Unity Catalog, and that's simplified a lot of the ways that we want to do access controls, and gathered it so it's just now inside of Unity Catalog. And pretty much all of our access control, we're trying to centralize all of it through Unity Catalog. So on ThoughtSpot or one of our other visualization providers, all access is marshaled by Unity Catalog here, because we want to make sure that we're not having 10 different spots that people could share data and then make it difficult to even know who has what. So that's for and then lineage, actually. And so this is the other part where a lot of our governance is actually about cleaning up our data sets. As I said, 9 years of accumulation of data and notebooks and scheduled jobs just leads to a lot of extra expense, a lot of it's really not clear what data set you should be using because there's 5 different ones that have kind of similar and overlap. So a lot of governance procedures we've done in the last 2 years are about removing dashboards, removing data sets, and up until the Unity Catalog migration, it was actually difficult to even understand what was being accessed and what was being used. So we're getting there, right? We still have a long way to go as far as cleanup, but in general, the systems we set up with DBT and Databricks together are pointing us in the right direction so that we could really make sense of data and make sure that it's high quality and gets to the right people.
Yeah, and I'll just add that from the analyst perspective, in the old world we were on Glue Catalog, and so everything was built by notebooks that existed in a monorepo, and so being able to translate back from, I want to look at this table, I want to look at this business logic, you would have to spend quite a bit of time either reaching out to someone on Slack or digging through the monorepo and finding the right table, let alone you need to make sure that that's the version that's running in production versus some archived version that might be in the wrong folder. And so between DBT, you obviously get lineage in the editor and you get the great doc site and everything, but then Unity Catalog provides that same level of lineage for us in the SQL browser and the schema browser itself. And so that's been a huge boon to us, as well as being able to share that metadata back and forth. So.
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges actually this last year is we brought on a couple different software providers, including DBT Cloud. And you don't want 5 to 6 different systems that are all disconnected. And so finding ways to essentially make sure that they build a platform has been one of our fundamental challenges. And I think we're pulling it off fairly well with our data catalog provider, but ultimately we really want almost all of our systems talking bidirectionally to each other. So that way you get the benefit of the metadata about data kind of always where you need it to be, so you can make sense of what you need to do and make sense of the data itself.
Awesome. And just some future-facing questions, like how do you guys envision the partnership between DBT, Riot, Databricks kind of evolving? What would you like to see? What's of interest to you?
Well, I've yelled at both DBT and Databricks about this, but ultimately, like if you look at the presentation that just happened, the DBT Cloud IDE is getting more and more features, and about making it easier to generate models and generate kind of the pieces that are more mechanical around those models. That's great, except for Unity Catalog layered with Genie has a lot more information about our data, right? So you may have metadata in DBT, but you have a lot more information about our data in Databricks. And now I have two different places I need to work, right? So because I want to be able to ask questions efficiently over data and have it generate the data itself and like tell a story maybe in a notebook, we're going to have like business users and analysts working over there because it's just more efficient. But then when they want to actually build the model, they have to go to a different IDE and start setting that up over there. So I really want a tighter integration. I want one IDE that I could work with both of, like get the best of both worlds through Databricks and DBT.
Well, you're in because we're kind of, sorry, Gary, you go first.
I was just going to say +1. Like I think for me and a lot of the analysts that I work with, we spend a lot of time looking at the query analyzer, which has a great UI when you're running on a SQL warehouse, it's beautiful, it's helpful to optimize. I'd like to see a little more integration in a bidirectional sense so that some of the new features they just showed with like the visual editor for DBT, having that query plan kind of baked into that IDE goes back to the one tool mentality that Parker likes to promote.
Well, I don't want to steal the win for some of the other announcements we're going to do later on in the year, but we're thinking of like even tighter integrations with the Unity Catalog, some of this semantic stuff. So a lot on that is coming up actually. So good to hear that you guys are also wanting for to have that as in like the platform. And one last question for you is, what's next for Riot? Like, how do you guys see the industry evolving? What are some innovations that you guys are personally most excited about as you kind of look at the gaming?
Yeah, I think it's a crazy time. So last couple of years with LLMs and Gen AI in general just coming out, there's a lot of difficulties around using them in gaming that people are working out, especially if you're an established gaming company that has IP. But it will be worked out, I think, relatively soon. And in that time, the ability to prototype games, to like create new games that have unique perspectives using Gen AI. Like right now, it's like, oh, an NPC powered by an LLM. It's interesting, but it's not groundbreaking. And I think what's going to happen in the near future is that there's going to be some groundbreaking cases of usage of LLM in gaming that's going to blow the doors open and create new genres. So it's definitely going to be an exciting time. And for us, it's also scary because we need to be ahead of it, right? Riot Games wants to offer their players the most value and entertain and have them interact with games that they love. And so how do we use Gen AI in a positive way that doesn't stoke fear and fear-mongering within our company that allows us to be ahead of the game rather than catch up?
Yeah, I would say +1 to all of that. I would say using AI to enrich and improve player experiences, whether it's through an interactive coach in League of Legends, all these things, these are ideas that are being discussed and talked about. And I think that there's a lot of interest, but it's also really making sure that this is something that the players actually want versus something that is just like, the hot new marketing buzzword that is all data people are talking about right now. So I think, a lot of what we're really focused on is making the experiences that we have, making them better, but also looking at new genre-defining games such as 2XKO. I know there was one alpha player over here. Thank you. Let's chat after. But yeah, looking for new genres and new opportunities. I think that's the big thing. Whether it's AI or not, we are constantly asking for player feedback and looking at their behavior in games and really trying to make sure that we're staying close to the trends that are happening in the industry and making sure that we're making the best experiences we can.
That's awesome. It was great to hear your perspectives on this stuff as well. And thank you for coming and joining us on the stage today. And I'm sure everyone was interested in understanding how you're integrating the data platform, what's top of mind for you in terms of the next steps, and how you see the industry evolving. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.